recording it. There we go, recording on. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Kim and myself for this valuable webinar today. It's going to be, I think, quite meaningful, and we're going to make it fun and lighthearted, and we hope you get a lot out of it during this lunch break. Kim, welcome.
Hello, so good to be here, KK. We've talked about doing this, so here we are finally making it happen, hey?
Exactly. And obviously Kim and I, being both based in Melbourne, we were obviously having our little Zoom catch-ups over the last couple of months, and we thought, hey, let's bring some advice to life and bring some inspiration, you know, and some ideas, and hopefully bring some value to each and every one of you, because I think the more we share ideas, the more we get something out of it. So what better way than to have Kim present?
It sounds funny saying present, given like, you know, still sitting in our office and that, but we'll try to make it as informal or informal as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Great. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining me, and over to you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. So let me just share my screen if I can. Okay, so can everyone, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so can everyone see that? Beautiful. And KK, I can't see the chat now, so if you just keep your eye on the chat.
Yes, no problem. I've got it.
That'd be perfect. Awesome. So what I really want to do today is, everything's so dark and heavy, and in particular for us who are still in lockdown in Victoria, but as a whole, everything's dark and heavy. So I've really gone on this mission to lighten and brighten everything within our industry, because it's heavy stuff, it's complicated stuff. It's actually boring in some respects. So the perception of financial advice can tend to be a little bit boring, but it doesn't need to be that way. There's certainly ways that you can lighten and brighten it. And part of what I want to do today, in keeping it nice and light, is also look at ways to make it easier to kind of help people understand what it is that you're bringing to the table and the value of financial advice, to make it more engaging. Because if people don't engage you, you can't help them, but also make it more enjoyable. So I had a girlfriend that wanted to see a financial advisor, and I gave her the contact details of an advisor who was local to her and who I thought would be really appropriate. Anyway, she never ended up going through with it. And I said, what are you doing? You know, they can't help you unless you get engaged. And she said, Kim, I was just too embarrassed. I thought they were going to judge me. I should have been at a different place, you know, given I'm this age. And it was hilarious. She was so scared of going to see a financial advisor. And I had to keep saying, this is not a doctor doing sensitive, you know, investigative work. This is just someone who's going to look at your money. She didn't do it. Anyway, so we're going to have a look at how you can sort of take some of that intimidation factor away and just make it easier to engage. And there's a great woman, she's a lawyer called Sophie Cohen. And I was lucky enough last year, I was actually emceeing an SMSF day. So, you know, heavy on the technical stuff. And the audience was actually financial advisors and accountants. Just on that note, when I say advisor, I mean financial advisor or accountant. I'm going to just use advisor to capture both of those categories. But anyway, she rang me before the event and she said, look, I'm just warning you that when I get up to do my session, and she's a lawyer, so she was doing a session on estate planning and some of the benefits of estate planning within an SMSF, so very heavy technically. And she said, I'm warning you because I'm going to come dressed as Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator. And it was absolutely beautiful because she actually did come dressed as the Terminator, and throughout her very serious legal presentation, she had the music from the Terminator or sayings that Arnold Schwarzenegger used in the Terminator. And it was great because the substance and the seriousness still came through, but it was so much more enjoyable. And her session was one of the very few where I remembered some of the details. So you can still add some flavor into what it is without losing the seriousness of what you're doing. And I kind of liken it to, you know, if you want to get kids to drink water, add some cordial, like just that little bit of flavor just can sometimes take what is technically quite bland and boring, and turn it into something that you actually say, yeah, I want more of that. Certainly not encouraging everyone to give their kids cordial, but it can work if you are trying to get them more hydrated. Another thing that I just want to share is last year I went to a women's business and sport event, conference kind of thing. It was about 500 people there. Anyway, long story short, my stepfather had invited me and he bought me some tickets in the raffle. And like I said, there's about 500 people there. Anyway, I never, ever win a raffle. This raffle was drawn and my name came out of the hat first. So I won my first raffle. And the way it worked is I then had to go to the front where they had all the prizes. So all the people within the audience who had donated prizes. And because I won, I got first choice of the prizes. So I'm standing there and I'm deliberating, do I get the hamper? Because then I could share it with my family, and given my stepfather bought the ticket, wouldn't that be nice? But I really want the dinner for two because it was at a restaurant I like, and my husband and I with young kids, we don't get out much. So I'm deliberating. Anyway, the girl that won second prize, who then gets the second choice, obviously got sick of my indecision, walked up, reached over, grabbed the dinner for two and ran off. And I'm left standing there going, oh, fruit, I would have picked the dinner for two, but I was too slow. Okay, I didn't make the decision quick enough and I was weighing up my options. And in actual fact, I ended up missing out. And it's kind of like there's a paradox or a fable about the confused donkey. And this is, I'm not making this up, this is a 14th century philosopher by the name of John Buridan, or Buridan, I never say it right. And he talks about this confused donkey where apparently donkeys don't think long-term. They can barely even think short-term. So there's this donkey in a stable, and on one side of the stable is a pail of water, and on the other side is a pail of hay. The donkey's there in the middle, and he can't decide, do I drink the water or do I eat the hay? And he gets paralyzed by this indecision, which is also a technical term called decision fatigue. He ends up choosing neither because he doesn't realize, like we do, that, hey, I could eat some hay, have a little nibble, run over, have a sip of water, run back, eat more hay. So we can think longer term, donkeys can't. So he ends up doing nothing and ends up dying of dehydration and starvation. But the message is a really good one, that so often we get paralyzed by indecision that we end up doing nothing, or we only think in short term and we don't look at the long term. So anyone in the advice space knows that a lot of clients suffer from this, and they'll do things that might satisfy them today, like the fancy car or the brand new house, but not necessarily catering for their tomorrow. So I was listening to a podcast, and this guy, Derek Sivers, and he was being asked, what advice would you give to your younger self? And he said, I would tell myself, don't be a donkey. Don't get caught in that whole space of indecision. And it's such a great place with where advice is today, because when we go through any period of uncertainty, one of the biggest impacts is our ability to make decisions. And this is very much along the line of behavioral economics, which I've become totally, madly, deeply obsessed with. And earlier in June, there's a group called Choosies. You might have seen them on daytime TV, not that I particularly watch daytime TV, but Choosies, they help you choose or rate different insurance premiums and choose which insurance option. But they did this really great report called the Choosies Choices Report. And it was only in June this year. And it was all about, they interviewed people around their ability to make decisions. And that one of the biggest issues with any period of uncertainty is people's ability to decide. And of course, we're going through that. But what it also showed is that indecision increased people's stress levels by over 50%. So if ever there was a time to highlight what it is that you bring to your table, it's to help people avoid that paralysis and to make decisions and to weigh up their different options. And we're not just talking about small decisions like what are you going to have for dinner, which ironically in the Choosies Chooses report, God, that's a tongue tie. is the second highest decision that was most frustrating with people at the moment is literally like, what do I have for dinner? But anyway, what it's showing is that you can imagine that if that decision's hard, how much harder it is to make some of the bigger decisions. And so where you can think about what you do and influence people's behavior. And when you think about it, that's really what financial advice is. Whether you're an accountant or a financial advisor, you're just helping people make decisions, big ones and small ones, with their money that actually impact their life. And when you can boil it down to something as simple as that and help people understand what those decisions are that you help them make, that's where a lot of the gold is. Because if you can take someone from doing nothing to doing something, then you've got to put them in a better place and get them out of that, like I said, decision fatigue. Russell just did a value of advice report. It's just come out, the 2020 report. So I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read. I know some of the media have got out there and put their thoughts around it. What was interesting is that they were saying one of the key roles of financial advisors in the world that we're living in today is their ability to coach people around their behaviors and that whole behavioral coaching piece. Because if people's behavior, and this is their decision making, is poor or not done properly, there's a significant cost. There's a financial cost, but there's also an emotional cost. So you're seeing a lot of people writing about this at the moment. Also, there's a guy called Dan Airley who I've got major brain crush on. And he's written a book called Predictably Irrational. This is a really highly recommended read for anyone that just wants to learn about how irrational human behavior is, but how predictably irrational it is. Anyway, in the book, there's a study that's done by a guy who is in the medical field, and he says, his name's Ralph Keeney, and he says that the number one factor that is going to increase people's quality of life and life expectancy is their ability to make better decisions. And he reckons that even above things like obesity and cancer and cholesterol and everything, he reckons that is one of the major factors that's going to increase people's life expectancy. So what a beautiful time to be in the space where that is predominantly what you do. And where I love the advice space today is it really is mixing up the whole combination around the financials and the left brain and the facts and the data, and then marrying them in with how people feel and their emotional progress and just supporting them on that emotional journey. And it's also not just how they're feeling, but how society has changed and how the expectations of our decisions has changed because of society's expectations. And here's a really interesting example. So another behavioral economist that I love is a guy called Guthrie Weistencheck. I can never get his name right, but there's this example that he uses and Seth Godin and a lot of other marketers use where you and your mate are walking to the pub, for example, and the way you normally go to the pub is you go and you normally do tag team around who's shouting for the drinks. And as you're walking along, you see a crumpled $20 note on the ground. So your first reaction is, oh, that's a $20 note. There's my shout for the first round of drinks, bargain. And you kind of go down to pick it up and you can see that it's got some mud or potentially dog poop on it. And the other guy goes, oh, you can't pick that up. That's covered in poo. Yuck, you can't be that desperate, can you? And the guy that was going down to pick it up sort of stands back up again and just kind of leaves it. And it's such an interesting example to highlight, we're so dictated or guided by what society thinks, what our societal norms are, that it actually influences our decisions. And I thought, when you are in predicaments like that, who's somebody that you want to be on your team helping you through them? And that's somebody who's got that voice of reason, which is an expert, which is someone like you. I thought these are some really great examples that really bring to life what you're doing. And right now, more than ever, if you're providing financial advice, I don't care if you're a financial advisor or an investment advisor or a risk advisor or an accountant or a mortgage broker, you're really all on the one team. You're all helping people make decisions with their money. Yet it doesn't always feel like that. And I know I work with a lot of businesses where it's multidisciplinary and you've got accountants and financial advisors, to use this example. And they don't necessarily look like or work like one team. Okay. It's very much like kids in a playground. You've got some that are over there on the swings, some that are over there on the footy oval. And instead of coming together and playing together in the sandpit, they stay on their separate sides. And it's kind of like, a boat going along quite nicely, and then along comes the pirate ship. And let's assume that the boat is the accountants and the pirate ship is the financial advisors. And accountants, and I'm generalizing, but you'll get what I mean. It's just when someone's on the opposite advice fence. And the accountants then think, oh my God, the advisor just wants to get on board and rape and pillage all my clients. They want to take them and do what they do with them. Yet in actual fact, that's not what the advisor wants to do if they're doing it right. If they join their boats together, they could sail the seas and find the gold, but they could do it together as one team, and they could let each other on their respective boats to look around, to see what it's like, to get that experience, because together they can do so much more. So, if I look at lightning and brightening 2021, to me, there's never been a better time where the collaboration of the different areas of specialty get together. Still do your own thing, but look at the client as one. They've got decisions to make that involve their money, and together you can help them both. You're not a pirate ship trying to attack. And when you're looking at how you can bring some of your value to the table and make it really easy for clients, there's really 3 things that need to be considered. First is the visual side of it. So going back to what I said earlier about, financial planning is financial advice is very complex. It's confusing. It can be quite boring. There's not enough visual appeal in it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Doing things like breaking up wads of text, using more imagery, using icons, using, cover pages on documents that, even though it might contain the substance, it contains the compliance requirements, but make it look more exciting. I was coaching a client the other day, and she said, we have these really engaging, meaningful conversations with our clients, and then we hand them a whole lot of boring paperwork and boring documentation. There's a real disconnect between the two. And I said to her, it doesn't have to be that way. You can change it. So we're on our merry way now, helping them create more visual appeal with all of their client documentation and forms and things that have to be filled out. The second component where you can make it easier is the verbal one. So this is the words you use and the written word. And again, a lot of the industry is very heavy technically, a lot of jargon and what have you. Stripping it down, cutting it out, and getting to the heart of it. And that's why I think this whole point around helping me make decisions with my money, it's just easy. It gets to the point. It's not, it's tax planning and it's financial advice and it's investments and estate planning. It's helping me make decisions and being very clear what some of those decisions are, so explicitly saying, we help people decide, do you put your parents into aged care, or do you get a carer to come in? Do you send your kid to private school, or do you stay in the public system and take them on holidays for life experience? Do you upgrade and buy the new fancy car, or do you save your money and get more Ubers, whatever it might be? But being very, very clear on what those decisions are and writing them and speaking them so that clients can connect those dots more easily. And the third part is the virtual value, which is really how you make people feel. And that comes down to experience. I'm going to talk about that shortly because, we've heard that saying about, people forget what you say, but they don't forget how you make them feel. Even more so now. So going back to my gorgeous girlfriend who didn't go and see an advisor because she felt intimidated and overwhelmed and scared. So being very conscious of all of those things is super, super important when you're trying to make it easier for people to understand. And we don't make decisions in isolation. Decisions that we make are typically based on a relative decision compared to something else. So I like this. When my girlfriends ever ring me and complain about their husbands or something their husbands have done or not done, it often makes me think, sorry, my husband's in the room next door. I often think, oh yeah, I'm on a really good wicket because compared to what they're experiencing right now, what I've got's really good. And this is what humans do. We compare things to the alternatives. But when it comes to financial advice, for someone that's never had it before, what do they compare it to? And this is why there's been so much research over the years about what the public, the unadvised public, feel financial advice should cost versus, as you would know, what it actually does cost. It's not their fault. It's just that they don't know what to compare it to. So to make it easier for you to help someone understand, what are you able to say, hey, this is like blah, 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 or compared to X, this is what it's like. So there's a guy, another behavioral economist called Richard Shotton. He's written this book called The Choice Factory. Super, super, super easy to understand. And it's just the 25 behavioral biases that influence what we buy. And I would say nearly every single one of those biases relates to financial advice and financial decisions, because every decision we make has a financial implication or consequence of some description. Anyway, he's got this great example about how you can compare. So I've tried to make this more Australian, but he uses an example of, if you've got a Ford Mondeo that's £20,000 and a BMW 5 Series that's £30,000. So in an Australian version, if you had a Mazda 6 at $40,000 and a BMW 3 Series at $60,000, now I'm not a car girl, but you'll get the drift. What sort of value do you think the BMW represents? And you can compare the BMW to the Mazda 6. And when he compared the BMW Series 5 to the Ford Mondeo, 33% said that the BMW represented really good value. So the BMW was £30,000, the Ford Mondeo was £20,000. So in this case, the BMW 3 Series compared to the Mazda 6, 33% said it represented good value. Then what he did is he said, okay, how does the BMW 5 Series compare to a Bentley Flying Spur? I've got no idea what that is. I'm sure there's some of you that would. So I've compared a BMW 3 Series to a Jaguar, an XJ Jaguar. And when he did this, so when he compared the Bentley, or when he got people to compare the Bentley to the BMW, now 47% of people that responded said they think the BMW is really valuable compared now to the more expensive Bentley. So in this case, the BMW Series 3 compared to the Jaguar. The BMW Series 3 hasn't changed, or the BMW Series 5 hasn't changed. It's still the same thing, but you've now got something to compare it to. And in behavioral economics, they call that anchoring, where you anchor, say, the Jaguar at 140,000. It makes the BMW on a comparable basis sound like a great option. And the reason I wanted to share this is not because you're trying to manipulate people into making decisions, but if you don't engage them, or they don't engage with you and continue to engage with you, you can't help them. So all that goodness that you bring to the table doesn't get enjoyed or benefited from if people can't make the decision and be able to make the choice to work with you. And even once they're working with you, to continue working with you. So what are ways that you can compare? And this kind of goes back to the old thing about, a coffee a day, or the poor old smashed avocado that just got totally crucified comparing if you bought a smashed avocado lunch every day. But when you even bundle things together, like if you look at how often you eat out, unless you're in Melbourne, then it's dirt cheap, but how often you eat out each year and compare that to the cost of advice, which allows you to make life-changing or quality decisions all your life that'll last you forever. How does that compare? And a friend of mine, we were talking about where we've saved money over COVID. And for me, a really big one has been, hairdressers, nails, all that grooming stuff that you can't do. And she was saying that, she normally allocates $1,000 a month to her look good allowance. And I'm thinking, fruitcakes, $1,000. And that includes, hair, nails, clothes, makeup, the works, which $1,000 maybe not that far off. However, when you think about that, that's $12,000 a year, right, to look good, it's important. But I could be engaging an advisor or an accountant or a professional year on year on year to help me make decisions every single year. For, in some cases, a fraction of that cost. Now, some cases it might be more, but these are lifelong decisions. So again, when you make it comparable, like as soon as she said that, the first thing I went is, wow, you could see an advisor for that, for a lot less than that price, maybe still look good on lesser budget and put more money into your future savings. Anyway, it's very personal. It also comes down to how things make us feel. And just on that, what I was saying before about kind of the economic utility and the social utility. So what society judge and how much that influences our decisions. We've got a child in grade 5, so very much around the parents of others who have got kids the same age. We're talking about secondary education for our kids, and of course private versus public is very much on the table. And one of my friends pulled me aside about a year ago when we were starting this conversation, and she said, Kim, I don't want to sound shallow, but we're thinking about sending our child to private school. And they never went to private school. So her and her husband never went to private school. But she said, and this is where the shallowness comes in, which is not shallow. It's a very legitimate emotion. But she said her husband works in a very, very high paying corporate job. And so what comes with that high paying corporate job is kind of a status of who they are and that, and all of them in that kind of peer group of where he works all send their kids to private school. And she said he could not turn up, you know, when the kids are in high school and say, yeah, they're going to the local public school. It's kind of like to save face. Now, the benefits are that the kids get the private education. But she said that was the number one factor. And she literally pulled me aside and was almost embarrassed to tell me. But I thought to her about that, don't be embarrassed, but how many or how often do we go deep enough to find that real why, to find out what goes on? And then for people to be able to compare it to something to say, yeah, this is absolutely worth it. So having a look at where you can bring some of that comparison. So compared to this, the cost of seeing a financial advisor is X. And I do this a lot with my clients. So to work with me, it might be, yeah, it costs a lot of money, but it's kind of like one new client. If you can, out of all of this, get one new client, you've covered that cost. And suddenly they go, oh yeah, makes sense. And some advisors do this very well. Others find it still a struggle because clients still think financial advice of any description's really expensive. Here's another behavioral science term. It's called the Decoy Effect. So Dan Early, in his book Predictably Irrational, there was this ad for The Economist. So this is a magazine. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. And they were running this example where they were advertising the subscription, either a new subscription or a repeat return subscription. You could get the web-only version of The Economist for $59 US, or you could get the print version, which also comes with the web version, for $125. Now, when it was advertised like this, 68% of the time, people bought the web-only one, which is the cheaper version, the $59. Only 32% bought the print and web, right? Which, you know, from a revenue point of view for the business is not great. So the decoy effect goes along the lines of throwing in a third option that doesn't necessarily have any value. Sometimes it's completely ridiculous. But what it does is it allows people to throw that out and then compare the other two against the relative benefit or value. And it's such a great idea. So what they did is they threw in the print only subscription at $125. It's stupid. It's a decoy. There's no benefit whatsoever. Why would you buy the print only when you could get the web and print for $125? But here's what they found, that when they added that kind of nonsensical, silly option that people would rule out immediately, they're like, well, that print only one was $125. I could get the web version and the print, so I could compare it. I now had something to compare it against. That's so much better value compared to the web only. All of a sudden, the print and web subscription sales went up to 84% of the total sales, and the web subscription went down to only 16%. And I thought, what a great idea. Again, it's not about trying to manipulate clients, but having that third option or that decoy option, it just allows me to make a choice, to make it easier to decide, yeah, that one's ridiculous. Now I'll choose between these two. I was working with an advisor who recently just wanted to upgrade how they bring their offer and what the packages are to the table with their clients. And typically they have one offer which just kind of covers all of their personal life, or another more expensive offer which is personal and business. So they only had the two. So what we did was we threw in a third option, which was kind of like the light version of the personal offer. So you've got the light version of the personal offer, the normal personal offer, and then you've got the personal and business. And when they costed all three of them out, the light version didn't come out much cheaper, even though there was less in it, because that first year or that first stage of financial advice, it's heavier, right? It's a lot of time and effort and meetings and data and everything. So I said, leave it in. So, but price it so that it almost becomes the decoy. Like, I'm not going to go there. The second option now becomes the preferable one, especially if I'm not a business owner. And then I can weigh up the relative value of the two. And it's amazing how even just putting that on paper made it easier even for them to have conversations with their clients. What it also means is, in the era that we're in right now, where there is very much an industry move towards annual agreements, mandated or not, there's very much that move. The typical path that advisors would take their clients down is, this is how we work with you, then this is how we work in year one, and this is what year two looks like. I mean, in the past, that would be an ongoing perpetuating arrangement. Whereas now with annual agreements on the cards, it might be that each year you sign up. But the choice is either, do I proceed or do I not? So do I still keep up with you and have advice, or do I jump off? The way the world is today, and the way we live, where we want a lot more on demand, and there's a lot more businesses that are doing things on subscription, taking that idea is, what options have I got for the entry point to work with you? So you might have, like what I said before, you know, a light version, a medium version, and a full version. Or it could be, if you've got quite a diverse client base, it might be, we have, you know, your millennial offer, we have your working parents with kids at school offer, and then we might have your nearing retirement or retiree offer. So again, it's just having different option points. Then at the end of year one, as opposed to the decision being, do I work with you? It's, I kind of want to keep working with you, but what are my choices for year two? And in cases, I'm seeing advisors where they have literally like a full service offer, a mid-range kind of offer, or an ad hoc offer, which is kind of advice as you need it. And even the way the payment structure is, that if somebody needs all of you all the time, the full service offer makes more sense. But if I don't want all of you all the time, what are some other options where, yeah, for a couple of years, it might be cheaper to go down to, say, the mid-level service. But if I do need to top it up and I've got to pay to get, you know, a whole new piece of advice done, then the cost would be more than it would have been if I had been on the full service for that year. But there's lots of different ways that you can bring this in. Sometimes I see businesses where they automatically give clients the choice every year. Others where you need to have been working with us for a couple of years, then we'll give you the choice. There's lots of options, but how can you, when you're talking to clients about it, one, allow them the choice, two, help them compare it to the other alternatives, which are still within your space, and just make it easier for them to choose and to move on. So these are some of the things that I'm seeing around at the moment, keeping it reasonably simple, but really allowing people to stay engaged and get the value of an advisor for much longer than they otherwise would have. And this is where you can use things like scale and technology and apps. Funny, we're talking to My Prosperity, to certainly help with some of that engagement and the visual side of where people are and where they're tracking and how they're progressing. So, and all of this is to try and help get people engaged. And, you know, it's really funny. We certainly do live in the world of, you know, the fear of missing out. And even, you know, when it comes to asking people about what they want, most people don't have on the top of their head a whole list of financial goals that they want. They typically just want things from life. And one of the things that I've been banging on about for ages, and anyone who's seen any of my sessions before would see that I'm quite obsessed with this diagram. because it's just an example of all of the things that could go on in the life of your client, the expected and the unexpected. And what it shows is every single thing on this page has a financial decision attached, a big one or a small one. Some are, life-changing and consequential. Some you want to happen, others you don't want to happen. But this is kind of all the stuff that as advisors, and this means accountants or financial planners, you do this. These are some of the decisions that you help your people make. When they get to that juncture of, do I do this or do I do that? You help them do it. And this is why everyone being on the same page, looking after the one client who's got these things going on in life, to me is such an important way, but also visually displaying it so that I can see, oh yeah, wow, that's my life. And I've been doing this with a number of advisors who are putting this into their materials. They're putting this into their conversations. They're putting it in their presentations, and clients are going, oh yeah, oh yeah. And it avoids that whole coming to an annual meeting and the client says to you, by the way, KK, I just want to let you know, we bought a boat 6 months ago, and you thinking, why didn't you come and talk to me about that? It's like, because you just do my investments. Why would me buying a boat have any implication or any discussion that you could possibly have helped me with? It's such a massive gap. So this is one way to visually make it far more appealing for people to understand the depth and breadth of what you do. But also when they're telling their friends, it's much easier to remember than, yeah, they do insurance, they do superannuation, they do business advisory, et cetera, right? And part of all of this is to make it easier. And having a master list, which goes along the lines of most people, because people don't always want the honor of going first, okay? There's something about, I like that somebody else has been down that path before me. So there's another book, this is not behavioral economics, but this is another book that I'm totally madly obsessed with called Exactly What to Say. And it's just a whole lot of really simple things and ways that you can frame a question or a statement that really get people on board. And one of his, I pinched it from him, was the saying, most people. When we get to a point of indecision, when someone says, well, what most people do when they're here is blah, blah, blah. And it either helps them decide, yeah, I want to be like most people, or I'm not most people. I don't want the status quo. I want to run off merrily in my own direction. It allows that kind of decision making. So it's like a tool to make a decision. The other thing, going back to what I was talking before about the life events, Morningstar did a wonderful bit of research called Mining for Goals. It's how behavioral nudges can help investors discover more meaningful goals. And what it talks about is that when you're meeting with clients and you ask them, what are your goals? They often don't necessarily come up with what the most meaningful goals are. They suffer from this thing called recency bias, which is where whatever was the most recent thing that I was doing, that's what comes to mind first. So if I've just been out on the weekend in my friend's brand new car, then if I'm asked what goals have I got, I might go, yeah, I want a new car. It's not necessarily because I want a new car. It's because I've just recently been in my friend's new car and it's more recent in my mind. So when you're putting people on the spur of the moment, like in a meeting, they get these thinking blind spots where, because they're put on the spot, they come up with an answer, but they haven't had a chance to really think about it. So there's two things that you can do to get around that. The first thing is to have a master list, which is just a list of all the things. So it could be like what I shared before on that kind of diagram, that's a visual version. Or in the Morningstar's research, they just list all of the things that people find as goals. And it might be, I just want to feel more in control, or I might want to I need to decide if I've got to send my parents to aged care. But when they did this research and they got people to write down their goals when they had to think of them on the spot, when they then gave them a master list, so what other people are doing kind of thing, 26% of them went back and revised what their top goal was. 50%, because they had to list their top 3 goals, 50% changed what one of their top 2 goals was, and 73% changed one of their top 3 goals when they had a master list where they could actually go away then and reflect on what really mattered to them. So having that master list, just thinking about what are all the decisions that clients of yours have made over the last 12 months, that can essentially be a master list. Or what are all the type of events that would go on in their life, like the visual, and then what of those have people done, and being explicit about sharing it either verbally, so the written word, the spoken word, or visually in some sort of a diagram. The other thing that you can do, the other tool to try and, stop this, thinking blind spots, is to prime your clients more before they come to meet you. So, I often think of, if you want foundation to last better, you put primer on your face first, right? Then you put your foundation on and it sticks. If you're not a chick who wears foundation, or if you're not someone who wears foundation, I shouldn't say chick because anyone can wear foundation. It's kind of like if you're going to paint your walls. One of the first things you do once you've kind of got rid of all the old wallpaper or paint and sand it all is then you then prime it with a primer, so that when you then put the next layers of coating on, there's a better chance they stick. So how can you prime your clients? So this is how can you get them prepared before they meet you for the first time, but also before every meeting that you have with them, and providing that thinking space and the framework around what are some of the decisions you want to make? What are some of the goals that are important? Providing the master list to inspire the thinking about what could be possible. Otherwise, if you just leave me to my own devices and there's a blank slate, I might not necessarily come up with what I want. So two things. One, you're getting in before the meeting so that you're avoiding the putting me on the spot, but two, giving them some shape and some structure, so that when they come in, this is great. And we've been doing this with an accounting business recently. And again, they're just getting so much more traction in the meeting, and it's giving the client a chance to think about things before they come in and have a deeper and more meaningful conversation around something they might not have thought. Another question that I love that is all along the lines of most people is, what have other people, so what have other friends or family done, so bought or experienced lately that you'd like to do or experience? And it's funny, I've been asking that just in my own personal circles. And it's funny, if I had have said to someone, what's something you want to do this year? I don't always get a lot of, I just want to get out of COVID. I don't get much past that. But when I say what's something someone else has done that you want to do, oh my goodness, they're flooded with ideas. Oh, I've seen someone do this and I want to do that. Again, it goes back to this, we don't know what it is until we can see it. Like when you're trying to make a decision and you're like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what I really want, but when I see it, I'll know it. That whole gut feeling. And this drives a lot of what we do. How can you stop having to wait for gut and intuition and actually bring that to table? And that's through things like priming and using tools like questioning that go along the lines of most people. Because after all of this is about so much more than just making decisions with your money, okay? And that goes back to even, my friends who are sending their kid to private school. It's even more than just the kids' education. It's their whole social status that's on the line in their minds. It's how they feel about being one of their peers. There's so much more to this. It's more than just investments about, how I can actually do things that are important to me in the future without depending on the balance of my bank account, or, to have a retirement that's going to be really valuable without having to rely on government support and the government pension, which is going to limit the choices and decisions. So even the saying, it's more than, it's one of my favorite sayings. And when you can use that, this is so much more than just insurance. This is protecting the whole livelihood of your family if something goes pear-shaped. So valuable and so easy for you to fill in the gaps and create that ending to the start of it's so much more than. Anyway, something that I've found has worked really well and is certainly helping advisors having these conversations with their clients. Because remember, at the end of the day, if the client doesn't engage or re-engage, then you can't bring your magic and weave that goodness into their world. So it's really important that you do that. 3 of the areas that I found really, really valuable especially over this last 12 months and with the period of uncertainty that we're in, is the reassurance that advisors provide. And one of the books, and I'm going to attribute this totally incorrectly, and it's not intentional. One of the books might be Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, which is another behavioral economist book. But they talk about one of the main reasons why people go to the doctor is not always because they're sick and they want a pill or a prescription or something like that. They go because they want reassurance. And this is a really interesting one. And I've done a video on this and shared it. So for those who have seen it before, you're going to hear it again. But I had this cracker of a headache that lasted a couple of days, and I don't get migraines and that. So it was not normal. It was out of the ordinary. And I'm Googling, right? Because what do you do when anything sinister, you Google. And of course, what came out of all my Google searches is I had something that was quite terminal and quite serious. In the meantime, my lovely husband's saying, yeah, do you reckon you could be dehydrated? Do you reckon you just need to drink more water? I'm thinking, don't be ridiculous. Oh, do you know? So ended up going to the doctor because I actually did get concerned. And the doctors did some tests and looked at things and whatever and said, look, actually, Kim, I think you're dehydrated. I think you need to drink more water. So with that expert voice of reason, knowledge in hand, I went home and shared with my husband that I needed to drink more water. I won't say what he said. But it's funny because the reassurance coming out of the doctor's mouth versus my beautiful husband's mouth, totally different playing field. The weighting I put on an educated voice of reason versus a delicious husband, totally different. And if you look at a lot of what advice is around today, sometimes it's that reassurance that, yes, you're doing the right thing, or yes, that decision is one that's going to at least set you in the right direction, blah, blah, blah. So it's really important. The other thing is around getting permission. Now, not that you need permission to make decisions, but sometimes getting that green light, that go ahead, that rubber stamp from an expert that allows you to do something that you want to do, it helps you justify it. So I know that when my husband was wanting to buy a new house, and I was like, no, I'm the Scrooge in our family. I don't know if you can pick that one up. And I said, we've kind of seen this house, and it's like, oh, maybe I could see the possibility. He was very clever because he got me to go there and visually look through houses at open inspections. And the first thing I did is I said, I just need to ring our advisor and see what he thinks. And my husband's kind of like going, you don't need his permission. It's like, yeah, I do. I need his permission because he's coming from a different place to where I was. I'm coming from a very emotional, this is a house, this is a big spend. He was then going to be coming at it, okay, I know what's important to you. I know what your financials are like, putting the two together. And he said, yes, this is smart, but only up to a certain limit, okay? So what that meant is I felt like I had permission to then go house hunting, looking at houses up to a certain level. And it was amazing just that sharing or that giving of permission, even though I'm a grown up, it just was so satisfying and rewarding. And the third part of that is, as an advisor, you give me the why, the because, the reason why you can do this, or yes, Kim, you can do that, but only up to this amount. That's so much of the gold, is that this is okay because you've got other things sorted, or this is the best way because. These are three things. And when you can narrow things down sometimes to just the three key points, and three is just easy to remember, makes it easier. Sometimes I might have the same letter. So when I talk to you before about value, I talk about the visual value, the verbal value, and the virtual value. By having those three of the same letter, makes it super easy for me to remember them and actually to recall them. You don't have to. These are just little tips and tools to make it easier to explain value and help clients understand. So one of the third parts about making all of this world of advice lighter and brighter is making it more enjoyable. And I like to think of it as, how can you get a better return on experience? Okay, on the experience that the clients get when they're dealing with you, because it can be scary and boring and all of that. But how can you inject some flavor into it? And interestingly enough, doing some reading, soap, you know how soap has a smell? Apparently from a hygiene point of view and a sanity point of view, it doesn't need the smell. It's purely injected with smell and scent to make the whole process of washing yourself something that's more enjoyable. Okay, it's even like flowers and bees. Apparently, that a lot of the reason why flowers have these big, bright, beautiful petals is not because, you know, we want to pick them and put them in vases and make our house look good. It's actually to attract bees to their flower, because apparently all the flowers in the yard are competing for the bees to come to pollinate, and that makes them more appealing. And I thought, so true, because financial planning or advice or accounting is never necessarily a really exciting experience, but it doesn't need to be that way. And if you're going to spend some time looking at your experience, then you want to look at how you can set the expectations of what working with you is going to be like by how do you get me? Like, even saying things like, I know that this is a really big decision, it's really scary. However, most people, what they find is when they do it, they feel such a sense of calm. Maybe it's something that just puts a smile on someone's face. So sending them something that they might not have otherwise experienced, or just making something easier. So, you know, I know you've got to fill in all these forms. What we've done is we've gone and pre-populated where they can. We've done everything possible without being in your shoes to do this. These are small things, and a lot of advisors are already doing it. But if you can look at other ways that you can bring this into your process, oh my goodness, it makes it so much easier. There's a concept called the peak end rule. Again, it's very much around psychology and behavioral science again. And there's a brilliant book called, and I've got a copy of it here, The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And it just talks about, one of the things I talk about is this peak end rule. And it's about the fact that we remember first. So remember first things. So for example, does everyone here remember who their first kiss was? Like their first real kiss? I asked that of a lot of people, and most people can remember who their first kiss was, or who was the first person that broke their heart, or the first person you married. Some people only marry one person, but not everyone does. But we remember first. We also remember peaks. So we remember highs, extreme highs and extreme lows. And we also remember ends. Remember the ending. You know, like when your kids kind of grow out of nappies, it's like, oh, wow, they're growing up. And that's the end of changing nappies. I don't know. I thought that was a really good time, not a bad one. But remember ends. Remember the ends of relationships, or remember the last day of a job that we might have. And they did this study where when you go to, say, Disneyland, you've got a whole lot of moments within that day. Some are good, some are not so good. Some obviously are at the start of the day, some are at the end. And what they did is they did this research where they sent people off to Disneyland, and every hour they got them to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how they were feeling, what the experience was like. And typically when they first walked in, that excitement of walking in the door, and you're standing there and you can see it and the gates are not even open yet, that got a really good one. The end, when they walked out through the gift shop and you go, oh, there's Mickey Mouse, that got a really high score. And the peaks in the middle, like not necessarily waiting for the ride, but when you went on the ride, the exhilaration of, you know, just when you're seated in the seat before the roller coaster's about to take off. And what they did is they collected their scores every hour. When they, at the end of the day, got all the scores and averaged them out, the average score was about a 6.5. Okay, so that combines, you know, the highs, the lows, whatever. Then what they did a couple of weeks later is they went back to these people and said, okay, on the whole, if you could rate your experience of Disneyland from a scale of 1 to 10, what would it be? The average score now moved up to a 9, because what happens is that we sort of remember the whole, but it's highlighted by the peaks and the ends, but also the beginning. So overall, we thought of a 9 because remember the peak, so the beginning, the ending, and the peak. And I thought, isn't that interesting that if you were going to spend time looking at how you engage people and the experience clients get, if nothing else, focus on the beginnings. So when I first engage you, what that looks like. The end, so endings now, especially under annual agreements, would be every, you know, progress meeting or meeting you have that sort of ends or signifies the end of a 12-month period. That is a critical time, because that not only represents the end of one period, they've got to make a decision, then do they continue? It also can represent the start of a new one. So you can get a double whammy. And then focus on some of the highlights in between. And if you do nothing else and just focus on those 3 areas, then you're going to give that overall experience, or the memory of that experience, a much higher chance at being remembered in the kind of light and more enjoyable than you want. So really, really important to focus on those 3 areas. So at the end of the day, and I know we're coming close to time, KK, so all of this has really just been about some different ways that you can make it easier for people to understand and make it more engaging and enjoyable. But doing it by focusing on the fact that one of the key things that you do is help them make decisions, help them make better decisions to do with their money, because it impacts all of their life. Help them join the dots between what you do and what's actually going on in their life, the events, the planned, the unplanned, the things that they know and remember. And how can you add your dose of flavor? What's your cordial going into the water, so that this doesn't just become something bland and spooky and scary, but something that clients look forward to. And like I said, when the process is more enjoyable, there's also more chance I'm going to share it with others. So on that note, and talk about getting more ideas, KK, you can share it in a second, but I know that you've got an amazing event coming up called Wow Crowd, where people can come and get some really inspiring ideas about others who are doing really great things in the world of business. I'll get you to talk about that. But on my front, if anyone needs a helping hand with anything, or just wants to ask me a question or follow up in a bit more detail, something I've said, please get in contact. I'd absolutely be delighted. I love this space and the opportunity right now for advisors to not even be doing things separately, but to get on the one boat and together sail off into the sea, for a really corny metaphoric ending. Then please get in touch. I'd be delighted. But KK, do you want to share a little bit about Wow Crowd?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kim. That was great. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for staying on. It's almost been the full hour, so I'll just wrap it up really quickly. Yes, we do have Wow Crowd, and it kind of comes to that notion of the 2 pirate ships, because at the end of the day, you've got to think about your clients. They've got at least 4 or 5 professionals that they're dealing with, whether it's an accountant, a financial advisor, a solicitor, a mortgage broker, etc. So Wow Crowd, Wow obviously stands for whole of wealth. So that's where we're coming from in that angle. So have a look at the link that obviously Kim shared. Otherwise, just type in Wow Crowd My Prosperity into Google and you'll see it from there. But would love for you to register. But thanks a lot. And Kim, thank you for sharing those insights. It's just such a breath of fresh air seeing it from that perspective. So thanks again for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy.
See ya.
Bye.